I was born with the gift of the gab. With MagMongoSlade. Shoot. He don't miss.
Well, let's talk about NXT Heatwave. A absolutely phenomenal show from top to bottom. Even the decision that I didn't like was okay because the match was great. There was no bad match on the card. Everything was fun, exciting, fresh. The crowd was into it. There were some botches here and there, but that's to be expected because it's NXT. But everything, as far as I'm concerned, could not have gone better. And about 10 to 15 minutes into this show, it was already better than Money in the Bank and Forbidden Door. I'm going to go on record and say that this show was better than both of those shows. Easily. So we're going to start with the main event. Ethan Page wins the NXT Championship in a completely fluke fashion by pinning Javon Evans after a trick shot. Actually, Trick Williams hit his finisher on both of these guys. It's just that one fell on top of the other one, and Shawn Spears grabbed his leg, his being Trick Williams, and prevented him from breaking up the pin. I guess he didn't know that was going to happen. So Ethan Page is the winner. Ethan Page also drew the ire of the AEW fan base with his criticism of AEW, which we will talk about in 1 second. But first, let's talk about this match. It was very fast-paced. It was a match in which, though I'm not a huge fan of Ethan Page or Shawn Spears, it was good. It was a good match. But Javon Evans was the MVP of this thing. I mean, this guy was all over the match, taking all kind of, bumps and, just being young and vibrant in the wrestling match. Some of the stuff he did looked better than it, and probably didn't make any sense. Again, I still don't understand why Youngblood must do that top rope cutter that he does. I don't understand why he must do that, but he did it. He also does this spinning splash thing that looks incredible from the top rope. The big spot of the match, well, two big spots of the match, both includes Javon Evans and Trick Williams. The first one, Trick Williams is, pasting Ethan Page outside the ring, and Javon Evans leaps over the turnbuckle, over the ring post, and into Trick Williams, and they crash through the barricade. Absolutely tremendous spot. Tremendous spot. The match continued, of course, afterwards, but what a tremendous spot. The second spot, that was crazy. Javon Evans goes to do a springboard. Trick Williams catches him and shoves him. He springboards off the top rope through the announce desk. And, of course, he was back up, probably about a minute or two later. That got a rest in peace chant. So get ready for that to be a thing that people do now, is chant rest in peace. So it was a great match. Crowd was into it 100%. And Ethan Page is the winner after the trick shot. Ethan Page winning. I'm not thrilled with that idea. I really don't care for Ethan Page. He's very bland. He's very much a guy that has some verbal charisma, but he hasn't put it all together yet. I think he needs a gimmick. Like, that all ego is a nickname. It's not a gimmick. He needs a character, And I'm not sure how he's going to be presented, but his presentation in AEW didn't impress me. His presentation on NXT and TNA didn't impress me. And his presentation so far in NXT has not impressed me. So, hopefully this NXT championship will give him a chance to show a different side of himself, to show what he can do. So there's that. Everybody else, I think Trick Williams is still in the conversation. He goes right back into the chase, which was good for him when Ilya Dragunov was the champion. He's already beaten Ethan Page, so this, of course, puts him right back in the picture. The Great American Bash is in a couple of weeks, early August. I think August 6th, I think they said it was. So it's not far. It's about 4 weeks. Hopefully Trick Williams is back in the conversation. Shawn Spears, get him out of here. But Javon Evans, physically, that kid has all the tools. He's not going to be able to do all of those flips and everything forever. So hopefully he finds, a style that he can do consistently. It doesn't require so much cooperation. But he's got something. He's got fire at the very least. All right, so let's talk about Ethan Page pissing off the AEW fans. So he was on Talking Shop, which is the Good Brothers podcast. And he says this about going to NXT from being in AEW. He says, quote, I went from somewhere that was so chaotic and unorganized to a place that, and I mean I'm still learning because I'm still so new here, but this is a machine and it's incredible. It feels so good to not feel like I have to do everything myself. To have people that want to see me succeed is kind of mind-blowing. I mean, it's a tremendous comment. And it's, similar to what, Chris Jericho said about going from WCW to WWE. Going from a place where you don't know who's in control, you don't know who's to talk to somewhere where the boss is pretty much unquestioned. But of course, he was talking about WCW to WWF. He's talking about, he being Ethan Page, is talking about from AEW to NXT. I can see how that could be the case. It sounds like AEW is sort of disorganized. This is kind of what CM Punk was saying about, AEW backstage. And he's not the first person to say it, but he's the most recent person to say it. And I will give them this. He made this comment the same week he won the title. So make of that what you will. But it's like, is that a coincidence that he takes a dig at AEW and then he wins the belt? But from what it sounds like, is from when he says that he doesn't have to do everything himself, it means he doesn't really have to try to think up his own gimmick and character and angle and all that kind of stuff and try to pitch it to somebody who might or might not be interested, but that he's factored in. Now, we all know that not everybody is having that experience in WWE. And Shawn Michaels made a comment about, wanting people to enjoy their time in NXT rather than, want to shoot out into the main roster, but want to take their time and enjoy the moment of being in NXT. And it seems that Ethan Page is trying to do that. He's trying to take his time and learn the process and stay factored in. But we know that when it comes to WWE, if you're not factored in, you're basically invisible. So he's new, so he's factored in. And by factored in, I mean they're actually thinking about ways to use him, what his strengths are, and et cetera, et cetera. There are a lot of people who are on WWE's roster that are not factored in, like, Cedric Alexander, for instance, who I think will have a, very different point of view on the subject. So we should ask him what he thinks. But, the match was great. Ethan Page is fine. I need him to grow as a performer and get out of this kind of blandly cocky heel thing that he does. And hopefully NXT pushes him to do something different. Because that's what NXT is for. And if it doesn't work, you can change it. That's what NXT is for. So, Karate Man being the NXT champion, I'm not a fan of it, but whatever. Okay, there's no reason to complain. All right, Lola Vice actually lost to Roxanne Perez. This match was also good. Roxanne Perez is a very talented girl. Of course, Booker T on commentary is absolutely unreal when Roxanne is in the ring, for obvious reasons. She's a graduate of his reality of wrestling school, so he's extra biased towards her. And it's funny. They worked the match in a simple way. Lola Vice, was good with the counters and submission wrestling, catching Roxanne Perez into submission holds like arm bars, and she actually countered a European uppercut into a choke, which I thought was very cool. And then she makes the mistake of trying to do I think it was a back fist, and she ended up hitting the ring post. That led to Roxanne Perez working the arm and shoulder, and led to, ultimately to the finish. So you had the pop rocks on the announce desk. Didn't break. Only got a 2 count afterwards too. So I was kind of like, okay. And then later she tried to do like the pop rocks in a cycle, and like do it again and again. She got it one time, rolled through, botched the second one, and then just did a third one and pinned Lola Vice. I thought Lola's time was now. I really did. It seems to be more clear than ever that they're saving her for the Japanese girl, which, okay, but she shouldn't have beat Lola. To me, I think the fans were behind Lola, and she's not dead. It's like one loss and losing in this way with, multiple finishers. It didn't kill Lola Vice, but it takes away something where she had so much sympathy going in and so much momentum going in, and now that momentum has been broken. And I'm not sure I'm a fan of it. And maybe it's because I really don't like Roxanne Perez. Like, I tolerate her because she's a good wrestler and she's in NXT, and as long as she's in NXT, I can't go after her too much because she's very young and she doesn't have much in the way of a personality, but she's got time to develop. It's like she got the basics down, the in-ring stuff. Her matches are not terrible. It's the character stuff that I have a problem with. And it's, the lack of character and her vocal ability. She needs work on that. They both do. But I feel like Lola Vice had reached a point where it was time to pay off some of that momentum that she has. And I'm okay with her losing, but I'm not really a big fan of it. But it does make me wish that the NXT still had tag team championships, because there are a lot of women who do get over and then they lose or something like that, and then you have nowhere else to put them. And you wonder, like, yeah, NXT has a really strong women's division. Why don't they have a tag team title for the girls? But, I ain't pushing for it. I'm just saying, why did they get rid of it? I don't know. Maybe that should be a question somebody should ask Shawn Michaels in one of these scrums instead of asking them about Vince. All right, match 3. Chase University loses to Axiom and Nathan Frazer. A sleeper of a match. I did not expect this match to be what it was. And it was far more fast-paced and far more interesting than I thought it would be. And Axiom and Nathan Frazer win when Axiom does, I don't know what the hell the move is called. It was like, they call it the golden ratio or whatever. It was like a running kick to Andre Chase, and it was a pin. Just so many crazy moves in this match that it's hard to pick one. You had Duke Hudson do a springboard German suplex on Frazer. You had, Frazer do a Spanish fly. No, it was Axiom that did a Spanish fly into Frazer's Phoenix Splash, and it was broken up by a Canadian Destroyer by Andre Chase. I mean, that was just insane. It was just so much stuff going on. Chase University is one of those gimmicks. It's been around for 3 or 4 years now. I think Chase University was formed just before NXT 2.0 launched. And so Andre Chase has been wrestling in a sweater for 3 or 4 years now. It's interesting. But it's a gimmick that doesn't die because they stay over, And it's amazing that you could do, Andre Chase University, this gimmick, for 3 or 4 years, and it's still interesting, and people are still into it. And people aren't bored by it yet. I'm very impressed by Chase University. Even though they didn't win, I was very impressed by their performance. Now, the first 2 matches on the show, absolutely phenomenal. The best 2 matches of the weekend. The first of those 2 was the Women's North American Championship match. Sol Ruca defeated by Kalani Jordan. Kalani Jordan and Sol Ruca basically turned into luchadors right in front of my eyes. Incredible acrobatics. There was some botching here and there when it comes to them trying to do the old standoff stuff, which I wish people wouldn't do. But a lot of their acrobatics and their offense was pretty. It was great. You know, Sol Ruka did a 450 lariat, a 450 clothesline, springboard, 450 clothesline. Like, bro, I've never seen anything like that before in my life. Like, that's crazy. That's crazy. I also like that Sol Ruka was actually the more vicious of the two, and she seemed to be the most diverse of the two, because she was the one doing submission holds, like, surfboard, and she had the other move where she basically was, had Kalani Jordan all twisted up, and she was the more aggressive of the two. Not quite the heel, but certainly the aggressor. There was some spots that really kind of made me jump, because I thought poor Kalani is going to fall on her neck or something like that. There was one such spot where it looks like Kalani Jordan was trying to counter a move into a Hurricanrana, but she couldn't get Sol Ruka over. She couldn't get herself up. So it just turned into a powerbomb and ended up looking nice. But you could tell like that was plan B. That wasn't plan A. But just a tremendous match. You got a Poison Rana from the top rope or the middle rope or something like that into the split leg moonsault, and Kalani Jordan wins. Absolutely phenomenal match between these two girls. Couldn't have asked for better. Yes, they both need help in terms of character and persona, but that's what they're in NXT for. I'm definitely surprised at how smooth some of the stuff is, but they do need work, There's another situation where there's so much obvious cooperation that you kind of need to find a way to make it look a little bit smoother and maybe add a little bit more edge. Like, there needs to be some roughness to their performances, but they were both baby faces, so it's you can forgive that it wasn't very aggressive in terms of fiery and showing some toughness and things like that. Very good match between Sol Ruka and Kalani Jordan. But my favorite match of the entire weekend, which featured my favorite wrestler in the world, Oba Femi, defeats Wes Lee in an absolute knockdown, drag-out banger in the first match of NXT Heatwave. It told the perfect story, great visuals, great psychology. A guy like Wes Lee, who I've been very, very critical of, he won me over in this match. I was already sold on Oba Femi. I don't care that he's green to a degree. I really don't care about that. He looks the part. He portrays the part. And he can really do things physically that are incredibly impressive. And he's a monster. And as long as he's booked that way, this thing will always work out because he's got charisma. He got personality. Wes Lee, all he had to do was be the fiery babyface. That's all he really had to do. Fight from underneath. And he absolutely did that with flair on this match. There was even a spot where Wes Lee was being stepped on by Oba Femi. Like, he put his foot on his back. And you could see Wes Lee powering up, like forcing his way up to his feet as a way of, being defiant to Oba Femi. And I just thought that was a tremendous visual. But the Oba Femi match probably produced one of the most visible and viral moments of the entire weekend. Outside of Chelsea Green falling from the top of the ladder in the women's match, Oba Femi throwing Wes Lee in the air like pizza dough was on everybody's Twitter account when I looked. It was tremendous. And he just tossed him in the air. Grown man tossed him in the air, and he was twirling in the air. It was crazy. Just crazy. And it didn't kill him. It didn't look like he was going to die, but it looked like this guy was no competition whatsoever, and that he was playing around with them. This was tremendous, And I like Wes Lee's offense. He was throwing body punches, and, Oba Femi was registering, but he wasn't overselling. He sold in something that was appropriate for his size, meaning he would stagger. This is always a big thing that I always have a problem with when it comes to big guys, is they oversell for little guys. Oba Femi, he registers the punch, but he doesn't let it knock him down. He quickly finds the rope, he finds a corner, and he just lets, him fire off body shots, fire off punches to the head or whatever. And even when he gets him on a big move, like it has to be something big, like a cardiac kick or something like that, for him to take a bump. Other than that, he doesn't really go down. And this allows Wes Lee to build up momentum. And it also shows the audience that there is some progress being made. Because early in the night, he registers less. And then as the match progresses, he registers a little bit more, to the point where he starts going down on one knee, to the part where he does start taking a bump. And then you can see that you're chipping away at him. The big monster guy, you chipping away at him. That's the story that you should be telling with big guys. The big guy, little guy, that's the story. That's the psychology of the match. That's what it should be. So, there was one botched spot where I didn't figure out what the hell they were doing. I think they were both on the top rope, and it looked like there was a powerbomb countered or something like that. And Wes Lee popped up, and Oba Femi was selling. And I was like, I don't understand what's happening here. Like, I don't know what's happening here, brother. But my favorite spot of the match was Wes Lee absolutely nails a frog splash from the other side of the ring. And instead of being pinned, Oba Femi catches him by the throat. Now, I don't know how many of you guys saw when Undertaker did that to, I believe it was Eddie Guerrero. I want to say it was the Armageddon Fatal 4-Way match, which was, I believe, the only match that those two guys ever had against each other. But he did it to somebody. I'm pretty sure it was Eddie Guerrero, where he took the frog splash, but instead of it being a pin, he forced himself back up into like a chokeslam position. That was nuts to see Oba Femi do that in this match. It was crazy. The big finish comes with a sit-out powerbomb by Oba Femi. Absolutely tremendous match. Can't say anything less than that. It was great. All right, on the pre-show, Ariana Grace and Carmen Petrovich defeated JC Jane and Jasmine Nix. Later in the show, Ariana Grace refused to team with Carmen Petrovich all over again because she said she doesn't want the anchor to weigh her down. This led to Ava booking them to wrestle each other on Tuesday to see who really is the star of the match. You also had a short promo segment. Lexis King challenged Tony D'Angelo for the Heritage Cup. Okay. I mean, Lexis King has not had any Heritage Cup matches, but whatever. And to end the show, we got a short photo of Joe Hendry at the very end, like a teaser. So Joe Hendry will be making a return to NXT, which is great. And it's not surprising at all, considering the numbers he did the first time he showed up. So the question would be, are you going to put him in the top spot? Do you have Joe Hendry and Ethan Page as, one of your top matches going forward? I don't have a problem with that. I still have a problem with Ethan Page not having a personality, but I don't have a problem with, WWE wanting to utilize Joe Hendry in a top spot. I think that's fun. Joe Hendry's a really good character that TNA really doesn't do well. He's been on that roster for like 2 years, bro. I mean, just think about that. He's literally been on that roster as a regular for 2 years, and he was the digital media champion for most of that time and was not even making the pay-per-views, and he was doing funny segments, and, they were all fun, and TNA just didn't know what they were doing with that guy. There are some guys that TNA do use that I wish WWE would give a chance to. A guy like Laredo Kid, that would be great. There's another guy named Leon Slater that I saw on Impact. He might be nice in NXT. He's a young guy, too. Very Javon Evanish. And of course, I'm a big fan of the Rascals. I hope they get a chance. But Joe Hendry on NXT? Yes, please. Joe Hendry versus Ethan Page? Absolutely. Let's go for it. Even if it's just Joe Hendry versus Oba Femi or something like that, that could be fun too. Just Joe Hendry actually doing something, being in the mix, is great for your product. And maybe TNA will smarten up and actually start utilizing this guy appropriately if they see that WWE might take him. Maybe they might steal him, and you'll have to realize what you've had all this time and you missed out on it. So hopefully TNA smartens up, because you need to have another wrestling promotion. You can't have everybody, in WWE and AEW. So if Joe Hendry is already under contract to TNA, hopefully TNA smartens up, starts using him better. Otherwise, shit, let him go to NXT and be a star, man. So to close off this show, Shawn Michaels, of course, did a media call in which he was asked about Gable Steveson and Drew Gulak, two departures from NXT, and why these guys didn't work out. And Shawn basically just said it was two guys that their contracts expired and they chose to go other places, or the company decided not to re-sign them. And his exact words were this. He says, "From my understanding, nothing on anyone's part other than contracts being up. Certainly in the place of Drew Gulak, from a company standpoint, there not being anything from a main roster standpoint that they were going to be using him in. In NXT over the last year and a half to 2 years, we've been trying to get into the process of keeping it fluid. It's all about getting to the main roster when everything is said and done. In 2 or 3 years, if that doesn't happen, we bring other people in or see if they're ready to move on. As far as Gable is concerned, he's an incredibly talented guy. It's amazing some of the things he can do. He's a dude who lands on his feet. I wish him luck in the NFL and excited to see how he works out. At NXT, we use people to the best of their ability. But from a main roster standpoint, if they feel there is not a place for them and their contracts are up, from a business standpoint, they choose to move on." So what he's essentially saying is both of these guys had main roster contracts and they were not going to be used on the main roster, so they were let go, essentially. I know there's a lot of conspiracy about the Drew Gulak stuff, in connection with Ronda Rousey, or Gable Steveson in connection to him being arrested for rape. But both of those things, well, for starters, the Gable Steveson thing happened before he even signed a contract. And it's likely that his progress was not up to the standard of the money he was making. And that sounds about right to me, I know some people want to believe that he was fired for all these moral reasons instead of the fact that he was just fired because there was nothing to do with him. Now, I do believe there's probably a little bit more to the Drew Gulak situation due to the nature of what's going on. And you could also chalk up the Gable Steveson thing to perhaps sensitivity to the Vince McMahon situation, that bringing a guy up on the roster who has that hankling over his head, even though he didn't go to jail, he was actually, technically he was not found not guilty. The charges were dropped because there wasn't enough evidence. But it's an interesting scenario to bring that kind of guy up to the main roster, and they have to be very sensitive about those sorts of things. So it might have been political. And the same thing with Drew Gulak, where you got all this stuff with Vince McMahon on television, and you got this guy who Ronda Rousey claims grabbed her inappropriately in front of the world, and nobody did anything, so you have to feel like you did something. And Shawn basically just says, the contracts are going to be run out. But there's a reason why they let the contracts run out. Because if you really wanted to use them, you could have. And the Gable Steveson was a big project for them. They invested a ton of money. He was, in some ways, like a modern Mark Henry. Mark Henry, it took years before WWE started making any money off that guy. Vince signed him to a hefty contract, and he really couldn't do much of anything. And he was signed in 95. He really didn't become a regular until about 97, And then, even then, they really didn't do much with him for years. I'm talking like almost 10 years. And his progress was slow. Gable Steveson, they signed him right after the Olympics. They gave him some personal trainings with, I think, some guys in Minnesota, and maybe Rip Rogers, and I think Kurt Angle even went and worked with him. But they couldn't get him to a certain level, you know, considering the amount of money they were paying him. So it's sensible to cut him, you know, good economics. But good economics can also cover up some of the other issues that you might have with these talents. So, Heatwave, great show. Had a lot of fun watching it. Tell me what you guys think, and I'll talk to you guys later.